Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine. We are on page 379, and as always, with our beloved Ranga, the last paragraph of 379 in Brahman Purusha Ishvara, and then we go to chapter 3, the eternal and the individual.
So, this long chapter, Brahman Purusha Ishvara Maya Prakriti Shakti, we are now at the last para. And if you remember the last discussion of the previous para, it is all sorts of impossible situations for our conditions here are possible up there. So, you can be outside time, you can be in the eternal outside time, at the same time you can be also in time, you can be here flowing with the time, with the timeless consciousness, all those different cases, all he has given there.
Well, I must say that before you read this, I didn't understand anything. And after you read it, I still didn't understand anything.
Well, the mental understanding is very limited.
Very limited.
All we need to have is the experience.
Yes.
But still, we can't make a full picture, but we can make the silhouette of a picture, the outline, we can get some idea.
Yes.
It does help. Sriramda is very categorical. He says that mental knowledge is of no use in the spiritual world. But it can be a help. It can certainly help. But it's not of any effective use.
Mm-hmm.
You can remain very satisfied only with intellectual knowledge, but that doesn't change you at all. Your change of consciousness does not come with mental knowledge. There has to be a push from within and an aspiration to take you beyond the mind. So if you don't understand anything, you are in very good company.
You agree, huh? All right. So let us begin.
So to get the context, I am reading to put you again back into touch with what he is saying. I'll read the summary of what he has said in the previous para, so you get the connection. Okay, so he has said in the previous para, there are three different experiences of time, either separately or simultaneously. You can have them all together also or separately. Number one, the static immobility of the self. Here again, there are two possibilities. Okay, so the static immobility of the sense, we have a fairly good idea now. Your psychic being or consciousness loses identity with the body-mind life. The mental being understands that I am pure consciousness and it is usually stationed outside the body. And when you are there, you are in a consciousness which is immutable, eternal, infinite, featureless. This is the state of consciousness in the self. So when you are there, there is no time for you. There is only the eternal present. Many people have had their experience and they express it in so many different ways. There is only a present. It's like the past, present and future, you are just seeing the whole thing like a picture. Okay? So that's the first. But there are two possibilities. First, a self-absorbed state, not even conscious of itself, no observation at all, completely plunged into itself, the divine consciousness. No effort or no attempt at moving out, like a black hole. Okay? Not even conscious of itself in a certain way. The second is self-concentrated, absorbed, but seeing only itself fully. So it knows itself fully. It's not a point anymore, it knows itself fully. It knows what are its possibilities, it knows what it can do. So this is slightly different. They are the two experiences of time in the self. Okay, the static consciousness. In both, there is no awareness of any movement or deployment of outward going consciousness. This is a timeless eternity. Okay, this is number one. Then the second one. A second experience is when past, present, and future are all seen together as in a painting. This is the Trikala Drishti. This is comparable to an artist who visualizes his entire work before executing it. It is somewhat similar to the way ordinary man sees past events, their beginning, the developing sequence, and the final result. Somewhat similar, simply saying. You see the cause of something, you see the development, and then you see the result.
So what Mother saw in us was Trikaladristi, Past,
Three colors.
present, and future possibilities.
Yes, that also she is seeing.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so the second experience is when past, present, and future are all seen together as in a painting. This is the Trikala Drishti. Trikala, the three times. This is comparable to an artist who visualizes his entire work before executing it. It is somewhat similar to the way ordinary man sees past events, their beginning, their developing sequence, and the final result. This, this capacity is certainly not available to normal man. To see all the three times together, normally you don't have it. Okay, so the third state is a processive movement of consciousness and its successive working out of what has been seen in the static vision of the eternal. This is a time movement. You see the plan and its execution in the world. So you are in time movement. You see the cause of everything, and you see the link, and you see the events here. Okay? So,
But you're not involved yet.
pardon?
Are you involved in it? Not yet involved.
The time movement is what we experience, I think normally that's what he's saying. But we don't see the origin.
Right.
Okay? So, all these three states are really one in eternity. It is the position that our consciousness takes that determines either the status or the dynamism. There are 7 planes of consciousness according to Srimdo's arrangement of the universe. There can be any number of planes, but you can divide them broadly into 7 planes. That is, Srimdo is following the Vedic pattern. And he says that depending at which level you are subject to the laws of that world. So you see things in a different way. That's what he's saying. That we have seen very clearly in the whole chapter. So, various possibilities exist now within this time. Number 1, a consciousness can stand and watch the movement from outside time. So I am outside time and I am watching. Okay. So, the second one, consciousness can watch the movement from above, outside time. This is outside time in the cosmos, but you can go into the transcendent and then from there see. Okay. It may not be very clear to us because in both cases you are outside your body, mind, life. But one is in the cosmos, one is in transcendent. Then consciousness can watch the movement from above. The next, third one, consciousness can be static within the movement. So you can be in your body, mind, life, but your consciousness is static. You are not identified with your body, mind, life. Okay? Then consciousness can take a mobile position within the movement. So although you are at a higher level of consciousness, you can identify yourself temporarily with whatever is happening. Then the next one, fourth one. Consciousness can concentrate on the movement and see the event from around and behind it. It sees the circumstances as well as what is causing the circumstances. Then all these positions are possible simultaneously or separately. So, consciousness, now the fifth one. Consciousness can see the movement from above. Sixth one, consciousness can see the movement from within. Next, consciousness can, itself being timeless, see the development of the event. Consciousness can, itself being static and dynamic simultaneously, even contribute and influence the course of the event. This
that
we saw.
was very important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those famous cases of John Kelly.
Yes.
So he is influencing the events here. He is in his timeless consciousness, but is participating and influencing events in the world, physical world.
John Kelly was a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And he told us the whole sequence, and I had it on tape, and that tape disappeared. Oh, what a shame. For just briefly for all of you, John was in the war, and he had a small squad with him, and the Germans were just thundering down and killing all his people. And he looked up in the sky, and he saw someone, he called him Great Sir.
Yeah.
And it was Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo would tell him exactly what to do. Take you men here, don't go right, don't go left. And he saved John and his squad. And we heard about this other man also, lost footsteps.
That's right. But you may always add something, because when he saw Sri Aurobindo, he didn't know Sri Aurobindo. So he did not recognize him. And this is also a very interesting fact. When he went, after the war, he went back to New York. He saw the Life Divine book with on the cover, Sri Aurobindo's picture. But in 1945, Sri Aurobindo looked like in the
very thin
1950.
Yeah.
Okay? But he sees the subtle body. So he saw the picture of 1910. So he didn't recognize Sri Aurobindo then. But another edition, when he saw Sri Aurobindo's 1950, he says, "Good God, this is my great sir." So then he recognized that. So that's how he came to know Sri Aurobindo.
Yes.
And then he came to Pondicherry. He stayed here for 2 years.
Yes.
About 2 years, and went back. There's a whole series of books, The Light That Shone in the Dark Abyss, detailing all his experiences. So Sri Aurobindo is participating in the war. Dunkirk also is a good example. How he saved 300,000 Allied soldiers. Okay, so we go back to our... Consciousness can, itself being static and dynamic, simultaneously even contribute and influence the course of the event. So this is what the examples we gave. All this is again the magic and the logic of the infinite. It seems to be impossible for our normal consciousness, but it is possible for a spiritually attained person. Now we read the last para.
Good.
Okay. So, if there can be this simultaneous multiplicity of self-presentation of one reality, we see that there is no impossibility in the coexistence of a timeless eternal and a time eternity. You can be in both the consciousness at the same time. It would be the same eternity viewed by a dual, I'm interpreting, viewed by a dual self-awareness, and there could be no opposition between them. It would be a correlation of two powers of the self-awareness of the infinite and eternal reality. A power of status and non-manifestation, a power of self-effective action and movement and manifestation. Their simultaneity, however contradictory and difficult to reconcile, it might seem to our finite surface seeing, would be intrinsic and normal to the Maya or eternal self-knowledge and all knowledge of Brahman, the eternal and infinite knowledge and wisdom power of the Ishvara, the consciousness force of the self-existent Satchidananda. So he's saying that all these possibilities are there. We can have these experiences. So he has given you a hint of already what he is going to discuss in the next chapter. Their simultaneity, however contradictory and difficult to reconcile it might seem to our finite surface seeing, would be intrinsic and normal to the Maya or eternal self-knowledge. And what is that? A power of status and non-manifestation. You are static and you are not manifesting yourself. But there is the second power, a power of self-effective action, self-effecting action, and movement and manifestation. So that's the next chapter. The eternal and the individual.
We had also mentioned Sri Aurobindo influencing Churchill.
Yes, that's right. Churchill was aware that he was being guided by some power. He made that statement in Parliament. He said, I can feel a certain power guiding us. That's why he was so sure that he wouldn't lose the war. There was a time in 1942 or 43 where all his military generals were advising him to start negotiating. But he refused. He said, no, I won't. So, let's go to the next chapter. The eternal and the individual. So, he has just told us just now, the eternal is the static, timeless, non-manifested state of the divine. And the individual is the dynamic, in time, and manifested divine. So that's the difference, and he is discussing this. The simultaneity of both is possible. The Isha Upanishad, he am I, soham asmi, that is the in the Gita. It is an eternal portion of me that has become the living being in a world of living beings. The eye of knowledge sees the Lord abiding in the body and enjoying and going forth from it, from the Gita. They have given the reference below in the footnote. So, Ansha Sanatana is the word used, an eternal portion of me, the divine is speaking, Krishna is saying. The individual soul is an eternal portion of me, a part of me. So that is the reason why, in essence, they are the same, and you can merge and become the divine. I read the next one. Two birds, beautiful of wing, friends and comrades, cling to a common tree, and one eats the sweet fruit, the other regards him and eats not. Where winged souls cry the discoveries of knowledge over their portion of immortality, there the Lord of all, the guardian of the world, took possession of me. He the wise, me the ignorant. So, this is a very famous image that comes several times in the Upanishads also. But he is quoting it from the Rig Veda. But the same image is there in the Upanishads also. And the image is this, that there is a common tree, that is the existence, the world of existence. And on a lower branch, there is one bird which is sitting and eating the fruit and enjoying, but also suffering. That's a normal human being. In ignorance, he is eating the fruit and getting the results of what he is doing, suffering the consequences. But there is another bird sitting at the higher level on a branch, and he is not eating the fruits, and he is just watching below. So he is the witness. It's very clearly the symbol of the self. He is in immutable condition, no movement at all, neither enjoying anything in the world. He is just static, watching everything. So this is the image. And this is the most fundamental experience of a yogi, that he moves out of his body-mind life and realizes the Brahman, which he has discussed in detail in the previous chapter. Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, Maya, Prakriti.
Could we somehow say this is also Purusha Prakriti?
Yes,
The two birds?
yes, you can say that. Definitely the lower one is the Prakriti and the higher one is the Purusha, the one who is static. These terms are flexible because we should not, if you try to determine them too hard, then you get into logical troubles. So, very clearly he is telling you what the subject matter is. The difference between the static condition and the normal condition of man, which is in movement. That is static, this is in movement. That is one, this is in multiplicity. There is timelessness there is time here. So, this is what the one and the many. So, if we keep this basic idea in our mind, many things become very easy to understand, or rather relatively easy to understand. Okay. Now, same though he is summarizing always in the first para, he summarizes what he said in the earlier chapter. Usually he does that. And then in the last paragraph, he gives you a hint of what he's going to say in the next one, which we saw just now. He said that. I am reading the first paragraph. There is then a fundamental truth of existence, an omnipresent reality, omnipresent above the cosmic manifestation, and in it, and immanent in each individual. There is also a dynamic power of this omnipresence, a creative or self-manifesting action of its infinite consciousness force. There is, as a phase or movement of the self-manifestation, a descent into the apparent material inconscience, an awakening of the individual out of the inconscience, and an evolution of his being into the spiritual and supramental consciousness and power of the reality, into his own universal and transcendent self and source of existence. It is on this foundation that we have to base our conception of a truth in our terrestrial being and the possibility of a divine life in material nature. There, our chief need is to discover the origin and nature of the ignorance which we see emerging out of the inconscience of matter, or disclosing itself within a body of matter, and the nature of the knowledge that has to replace it. To understand too the process of nature's self-unfolding and the soul's recovery. For in fact, the knowledge is there concealed in the ignorance itself. It has rather to be unveiled than acquired. It reveals itself rather than is learnt by an inward and upward self unfolding. But first, it will be convenient to meet and get out of the way one difficulty that inevitably arises, the difficulty of admitting that even given the immanence of the divine in us, even given our individual consciousness as a vehicle of progressive evolutionary manifestation, the individual is in any sense eternal, or that there can be any persistence of individuality after liberation, has been attained by unity and self-knowledge. So, he has summarized and is also telling you what we are going to discuss in this chapter. So, he is saying, is the individual eternal or not? Normally we think that, in fact, there are many religions also which say you have only one life. Live it as you want, okay? But he is saying we will discuss this issue and see that the individual has an eternal existence. He does not need to disappear after death. That's what he's saying. And now in the physical world, it is being realized that you don't have one life. So you don't disappear. The eternal, the individual is eternally there, taking different bodies. That is being realized very much now because so many people are having experiences and reporting it on the internet. So it is very common knowledge now that the individual also has an eternal existence. That he is going to discuss with some amount of logic and examples and all. So we'll read the line by line and see his language. Because once you get the hint of what language he uses, then it becomes easy to understand him. So, there is then. Now, that word then is very interesting. He is summarizing. Whatever we have said, so this is the summary. He uses this word then, immediately you know that he is talking of whatever he has said earlier as a result. Okay, so, this is his style. He very often says this. There is then a fundamental truth of existence, an omnipresent reality. Chapter 4. Omnipresent reality. You can call it God, you can call it consciousness, you can call it Purusha, you can call it whatever you want. But it's an omnipresent reality. It's there everywhere. And where it is, he is now telling you. Okay? Omnipresent reality. Where is it? Omnipresent above the cosmic manifestation. So above the cosmic manifestation, transcendent. Then, and in it, in the cosmos, and that's the universal. He is there at the universal level. And immanent in each individual. So in the very first sentence he has told you that there is an omnipresent reality which is outside the cosmos, in the cosmos, and in every individual. And the individual includes even stones and whatnot, even atoms. So he is there everywhere. The omnipresent reality. This is philosophy, so he is not talking of God. God, he will use the word in synthesis, but not here. There is also a dynamic power of this omnipresence. Okay. Now he's using a slightly, he has said omnipresent. So now he is taking up that term. There is also a dynamic power of this omnipresence, a creative or self-manifesting action of its infinite consciousness force. So, it can be static, but it can also be dynamic and create. So, this omnipresent reality has the power to remain static as well as to create the world. There is as a phase or movement of the self-manifestation, a descent into an apparent material inconscience. So, the inconscience seems to be really not conscious, but it's only apparent because there is a involution. The divine has descended into the inconscience, hidden himself with many, many layers of different thicknesses and densities, and is hiding there, and he is trying to come out. So there is the involution, and then there is the evolution out. Okay, so descent into an apparent material inconscience, an awakening of the individual. So first of all, there is a descent, and then there is an awakening of the individual out of the inconscience, and an evolution of his being into the spiritual and supramental consciousness. So first of all, there is an awakening of the individual. He is sleeping there, so he is awakened, and then there is a spiritual development up to the supramental. And power and now. And the other one is the power of the reality into his own universal and transcendent self and source of existence. It is on this foundation that we have to base our conception of a truth in our terrestrial being and the possibility of a divine life in material nature. The others are not even considering a divine life in material nature. They say not possible. Most of them say that. Most of the religions also say that. There is a world of ignorance and imperfection and will remain like that. You want perfection, go up.
Or illusion.
Yeah, that's right. But Srimad is saying the divine is present here also in the individual. And it is on this basis, this is my theory, and this is how I am going to develop the theme based on this perception that God is there, transcendent, cosmic, as well as individual. Okay, so it is on this foundation that we have to base our conception of a truth. When he speaks of we, he means himself. And our conception also, he means the integral philosophy of a truth in our terrestrial being and the possibility of a divine life in material nature. There, our chief need is to discover the origin and nature of the ignorance due to the involution, which we see emerging out of the inconscience of matter or disclosing itself within a body of matter, and the nature of the knowledge that has to replace it. To understand too the process of nature's self unfolding and the soul's recovery. So, full of suggestions. We have to see carefully what he's saying. There, in the physical world, material nature, our chief need, the philosophy that we are pursuing, is to discover the origin and nature of the ignorance. So, he is talking of origin and nature of ignorance. There's a whole chapter on it later on. The origin of evil and the origin of ignorance. So, he is going to examine all these things he is telling you now, and he will examine in many, many chapters. We have to find out from where has the ignorance come. There is a descent and an involution. But at what stage does the ignorance come in? Okay? Of the ignorance, which we see emerging out of the inconscience of matter or disclosing itself within a body of matter. So that's very interesting. Within a body of matter, living creatures. Because only in living creatures is this divine presence disclosing itself. It's not a new thing that is coming. It is already there and it is disclosing itself. It's a development, disclosing itself within a body of matter, and the nature of the nature of the knowledge that has to replace it. So knowledge has to replace the inconscience, ignorance. And that also is in very, very small steps. This is what we are going to examine. That's what he's saying. To understand too the process of nature's self-unfolding and the soul's recovery. So nature's self-unfolding. It unfolds, whatever is there inside it, it goes on manifesting, moves on manifesting. Out of matter comes life, out of life comes mind, and out of mind comes spiritual levels of consciousness, and finally ending in the supermind. So, for in fact, the knowledge is there, concealed in the ignorance itself. It has rather to be unveiled than acquired. So this also he says in the synthesis also, that the Shastra and the Guru is there already within yourself. So it has to unfold, and he uses the image of a root, a bud, and the efflorescence. So the root is the involution, and the bud is the beginning of his spiritual life, and the efflorescence, the flower blooming. That's what he says. So everything is there already in you. There's only a disclosing. There's a development, not a new discovery and a new acquisition. That is the reason why very often when you have a spiritual experience, you realize that I knew about this, but I had forgotten. That's the nature of the experience that you get. This is what you get, an impression.
So the man being born into the ignorance is not really a yogic understanding. The ignorance is just covering up what already is
That's right.
divine in humanity.
That's right. So, by an inward, another, it has rather to be unveiled than acquired. Okay? So, it reveals itself rather than is learnt. So he says very clearly that you have to experience it. You don't learn it, you don't acquire. Scientific knowledge and education in the world is an acquisition. You learn this, you learn that, you learn that. But the spiritual knowledge is not of that nature. It cannot be learnt. It has to be experienced. He is saying it has to be acquired. It reveals itself rather than acquired by an inward and upward self unfolding. So, the inward is the psychic being and the upward is the self. These are the two keys. And in the synthesis, he says they are the grappling hooks by which you can pull yourself out of ignorance. One is the psychic being and the other is the self. The psychic being is in the intraconscient, deep into yourself. And the self is above. You have to climb out of your body, mind, life to go up. And then you experience the self. They are the two grappling hooks. Very interesting image he uses. So, normally, when you go into your intraconscient and hit the psychic being, it gives you love and intimacy with the divine. Normally. And when you go up, you get knowledge. But it's not that you don't get love and power, you do get. But this is a general trend. But first, it will be convenient to meet and get out of the way one difficulty that inevitably arises, the difficulty of admitting that even given the immanence of the divine in us, even given our individual consciousness as a vehicle of progressive evolutionary manifestation, the individual is in any sense eternal, or that there can be any persistence of individuality after liberation has been attained by unity and self-knowledge. Liberation is attained how? By the realizing of unity and self-knowledge. So, he's saying that there are many philosophies which say that the individual disappears after death or even after realization. So, it can disappear after death and can disappear. Realization is, you don't need the individual anymore. Okay, that's what he's saying. But we will examine that and see. And his contention is that the individual is always eternally existent, not the ego. Our idea of ego is what we are at present, but that's an illusion. The ego disappears, but not the true individual.
And the true individual is always evolving.
Always evolving, yes. Even at the spiritual level, it is evolving.
Yes.
It evolves up to the supermind. Even beyond supermind, there is an evolution. He says that. And the true individual is an interesting image too. I've repeated this, but it's very interesting in the context. The grain of salt is the individual ego. It's a grain of salt. It has got size, weight, color, form, taste, everything. So this is the individual. But you put that salt into water, the salt grain has disappeared. The ego has gone away. But there is salt everywhere, saltiness, without form and without any location. This is the true individual. The image is very interesting to understand what is meant by the self. Okay? So that's what he wants to prove, that it is like that. And his philosophy is absolutely consistent with the Vedanta philosophy, as well as the Gita also is part of the Vedanta. So, there is nothing in his philosophy that contradicts the Vedantic philosophy. But he goes beyond. He goes beyond to the evolution. It's hinted at in the Vedantic, but not spelt out clearly. But he goes beyond and says that the evolution will also create a divine life upon earth. That's a possibility. And if that possibility has to be realized, the individual must be eternally existent. This is a difficulty of the logical reason and must be met by a larger and more Catholic enlightening reason. Or, if it is a difficulty of spiritual experience, it can only be met by wider resolving experience. It can indeed be met also by a dialectical battle, a logomachy of the logical mind. But that by itself is an artificial method, often a futile combatant in the clouds and always inconclusive. Before reading, I'll just point out because today we are not going to discuss. But logomachy means argument about words or the meaning of words. That's logomachy. So it's not of any use in the spiritual world. That's what he's saying. Logical reasoning is useful and indispensable in its own field in order to give the mind a certain clearness, precision, and subtlety in dealing with its own ideas and word symbols, so that our perception of the truths which we arrive at by observation and experience, or which physically, psychologically, or spiritually we have seen, may be as little as possible obscured by the confusions of our average human intelligence, its proneness to take appearance for fact, its haste to be misled by partial truths, its exaggerated conclusions, its intellectual and emotional partialities, its incompetent bunglings in that linking of truth to truth, by which alone we can arrive at a complete knowledge. We must have a clear, pure, subtle, and flexible mind in order that we may fall as little as possible into that ordinary mental habit of our kind, which turns truth itself into a purveyor of errors. A purveyor is a supplier, one who supplies errors. So our truth must not become the source of errors. That's what he's saying. That clarification, the habit of clear logical thinking, clear logical reasoning, culminating in the method of metaphysical dialectics, does help to accomplish, and its part in the preparation of knowledge is therefore very great. Mental knowledge does help, he's saying. But by itself, it cannot arrive either at the knowledge of the world or the knowledge of God, much less reconcile the lower and the higher realization. So reason will not get you anywhere. It's very, very useful in the physical world where it is indispensable. You must have reason. Otherwise you will be in trouble. It is much more efficiently a guardian against error than a discoverer of truth. This is reason. It's a guardian against error rather than a discoverer of truth. Although by deduction from knowledge already acquired, it may happen upon new truths and indicate them for experience or for the higher and larger truth-seeing faculties to confirm. What these larger truth-seeing faculties are, we will discuss afterwards. In the more subtle field of synthetical or unifying knowledge, the logical habit of mind may even become a stumbling block by the very faculty which gives it its peculiar use. For it is so accustomed to making distinctions and dwelling upon distinctions and working by distinctions that it is always a little at sea when distinctions have to be overridden and overpassed. Our object then, in considering the difficulties of the normal mind when face to face with the experience of cosmic and transcendental unity by the individual, must be solely to make more clear to ourselves, first, the origin of the difficulties and the escape from them, and by that, what is more important, the real nature of the unity at which we arrive, and of the culmination of the individual when he becomes one with all creatures and dwells in the oneness of the eternal. So he is going to examine all these aspects. Where is the ignorance coming from? How does it develop? And what happens? The culmination. All this is going to discuss.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste all.